You discovered an abandoned 1,000-page cookbook one day, and strangely, you found that you can't flip to the next recipe without making the current dish. Flipping the page, you see the next dish calls for a liter of stardust and gives a simple explanation of how to build a starship. You would think something like stardust would be hard to make, right? A dash of sunshine mixed with sugar spice and everything nice? Or something along those lines? Actually, a liter of stardust is quite simple to make. A mix of petrol, sugar, Vegemite, breadcrumbs and pink glitter. It has to be pink or else it won't work. The recipe very clearly stated that. Actually, the ingredients were the only part of the cookbook that was clear. Everything else was a written dump of scientific words that even Einstein couldn't decipher. And yet, here I was, wearing a blue and red apron with a marshmallow bear on it. Ready to tackle this recipe. It was weird how the cookbook worked, only allowing the reader to turn the page after making the current recipe. It was like a fighting game tutorial that wouldn't let you skip to the next move until you could do a reverse dodge spin, or some other move that would take you hours to learn and would never be used again. Still, I persisted, wanting to learn how to make this starship. I trailed the silver top of the cookbook, feeling a ticklish shock through my body as I opened to my current page, trying to make sense of the instructions. Put the stardust into the final product and give it a shake. Remember, you need to obey the sixth law of the Anxious Space Federation. This requires the user to have an intimate knowledge of the Zaxpa positioning and the rotor of the Avilia. Great, the instructions have German words in them. I groaned, holding my phone's translator up to the book, only for it to come up as undetectable. Okay, so it isn't German. French? Again, nothing. After 5 tries, I realized it had to be an unknown language, something not from this world. Without an alien-to-human translator on hand, I had to wing it. Zaxpa sounds like zebra, if you say it wrong, so where would you position a zebra? Well, it has to be up front because it's fast, I concluded. Going back to the cookbook, I looked for the part of the recipe that had to do with the Zaxpa's positioning. To make that, I needed 5 layers of pastry, butter, a miracle, and 2 frogs. Although the frogs could be replaced with red artificial frogs if no live frogs were on hand. Constructing the ingredients into a square, I did my best to form what would be the cockpit of the spaceship, setting it down. While it looked crummy, after an hour in the oven, it had puffed up, forming a solid structure. Avilia? Evil? Aval? Oval? Ah, oval. It was a stretch, like how I had to stretch the dough into an oval to make it. Placing the dough into the oven, I made a circular bread loaf, one that I added edible gold to, positioning the gold so it looked like the blades of a fan. So, I had the Avilia and the Zaxpa, now I needed to make the ship. The ship was a mix of dough and pastry. The dough forming a large body, while the pastry worked as a cover, being wrapped around the bread to give it a flaky armor. When the two combined, it set up the perfect starship body. Now all I had to do was attach all the parts. Cutting out a hole for the cockpit, I placed it inside, making sure the 2 red frog pilots were cozy in their new home. Once it was locked in, the Avilia was added to the bottom, which I assume would allow the structure to fly. Then it was complete. A structure of edible dreams sitting right before me. I went to turn the page of the cookbook, only for it to remain locked. Come on, stupid thing. I made the recipe. As I fought to turn the page, I bumped my bag of stardust, forgetting the key ingredient. Right, stardust. I poured the stardust into the body of the ship and gave it a shake. At first, nothing happened. It sat motionless on the counter, with the 2 candy pilots staring at me, showing their inanimate disappointment. Before I could shake it again, the starship whizzed through the room, letting out a mighty "Sa-zoo-ow." The sound followed by a wonderful sight, watching the ship dance around the room, flying in a circular pattern at incredible speeds. The ship had no control as it flew, since the candy frogs had never been to flight school, nor had limbs to control it with. So, it bounced off walls and fridges, looking weightless as the bread absorbed the impact, allowing it to continue its flight without falling apart. Zzz-ow. After a good 3 minutes, the flight ended. The ship running out of stardust, spiraling into the counter after its successful flight. I saluted the red frogs for their efforts before biting into a chunk of their ship, enjoying the beautiful taste of that buttery bread. So, good. Between chews, I reached over to the cookbook, flipping the page over. Oh, Telugu, that sounds fun. I'll have to try that next week. I ate as much of the ship as I could before putting the rest away, still wondering about the origins of the cookbook. Was it a Mad Baker's dastardly creation? A fantasy book from another universe? Or an alien child's scientific cookbook? Maybe it was none of those? While I might never know the true origins of the book, I would still enjoy its recipes.